Welcome to Global Information Security Society for Professionals of Pakistan.
So welcome back once again. Just to start with, I'll just, before we start the session, I would like to know about the level of awareness about this topic and the current wave of digital transformation and the digital economy around among the participants. So I just would like to start with a couple of the interaction, sort of an interactive way of starting, just to engage the audience. I have a couple of questions where I would like the participants to respond to, and then based on that, that will give us a good idea that how much familiar our participants are about the topic and so forth. Accordingly, I will basically decide to go more deeper, more technical, or I'll keep it at a high level because they are. Today we have invited a bit of a few non-technical people on board as well, just to understand the concept of digital trust. So I'll just share my screen, and here we go. So can you see my screen? Shahzad bhai, can you confirm?
Yes, we can see you.
Right. So now, if I'm pressing this present, and now if you can see on the top of the screen a one number, and you can go to the menti.com website where you have to interactively respond to this question. So what exactly you understand about this term? If you haven't heard this term earlier, just make up with the contextual relevance, which you can understand from the name itself, and just give the response in 1 or 2 words. So it will appear live on the screen. So you can start now. Can you? Right, no idea, right? But try to understand from the general word, the trust, which every one of us, we understand what exactly trust means. So trust basically what do you think of this term digital trust from that relevance as well? Just make up your mind, whatever you can think of, come up with an idea. Trust between technology, a very, very good logic. More, but I need at least 5 to 10 responses visible on the screen to go to the next one. So trust on internet, right? So internet we can generally refer as a wild as well. E-trust, which is a synonym of digital trust, we can say as well. Yeah, okay. The data digitalization trust. Okay, trust on transformation. Right. I would like to know that who has given this response, trust on transformation, and who else? A few more to go. One more. So far, 7 people have responded. Right. So I can feel like when participants have a very surface level of understanding about the term, and most of us are new to this term itself. So it means when I'll keep it a session a bit high level, so that when we can just understand the concept basically, and then we can, depending on the need, we can go deeper to discuss about the technical aspects of this, such as zero trust and so forth. So I'll close this one, and then I will go to the next. I'll go to the next question. How do I do that? Okay. So now here we go to the next question. So do you think that trust is important to run your digital enterprise? Your digital enterprise can be anything, your business, your corporate. As an example, your website as well is contextually a digital enterprise. Okay. Yes, everyone, we know that trust is important. 10 people said yes. Wow, okay. No one has said no, and no one has said don't know. So we know that when trust is very important, but we don't know what exactly we can interpret the trust in the digital world or digital enterprise. Anyone else to respond to? Or I'll call it off. Okay. So good understanding about the trust. So let's move to, I'll close this sharing and then I'll start with the presentation. Can anyone confirm that my screen is visible now?
Yes, we can
Yes,
see
it's
that.
visible.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. So Shehzad bhai, you can interrupt me anytime in the middle if there is a need to.
No, it's okay.
But
Please
how work-
continue, inshallah.
Yeah.
And yes, to be honest, when you give me the topic, I even myself did not know, what it will constitute of. I didn't ask
Right.
you, but I think many people think, what is this topic about actually?
Right. The बुनियादी तौर पर, okay, let me just give you a background before we start so that we can all of us in the same page, so that when I can go more in a higher pace on the some slides instead of going into deeper. The trust which we deal with in the real life among the people, it's the same philosophy which is being applied in businesses and corporates among the groups and all that. However, in digital transformation, which has basically transformed the whole world and the way of our thinking and the way of our interaction has actually changed the way of our dealing. So that's how our, the relational traits have impacted as well. So that's why this topic is applicable not to the cybersecurity professionals. These are equally applicable to risk professionals, privacy professionals, technopreneurs, CEOs, anyone who is sitting in the boardroom, C-suite people, as well as in particularly CROs. So just to start with a quick intro of mine, when I'm primarily an IT GRC expert, specializing in digital trust. My doctoral research is in digital trust as well. And when I was been in big four consulting firms for the past more than a decade and a half, and was been serving in more focused industries such as public sector, banking, oil and gas. I'm a member of like all the well-known or relevant professional associations as well, and I'm working for along with some welfare organizations just to helping the community. I'm a CISA as well, one of the quite oldies one when I'm CISA from 2003, and CRISC and CDPSE recently acquired. I'm happened to be the first CDPSE in Qatar. And I think among the very first few, one who actually got on the Gispp platform as well. So the table of contents is basically been first we try to understand what is the digital age, what exactly this age has impacted our lives, how we are based, the means of doing business, the digital economies, how they have evolved, as well as the nature of digital enterprises. And then we'll directly try to understand, the concept of digital trust and the relevant strategies and approaches to build the digital trust among the related parties. And then there are some important concepts, how while being a CISO or whatever way, if you are into the ownership role, of driving these such initiatives, then how you're going to implement the governance framework related to the digital trust in the environment, and what factors we have to consider. At the end, we will take few Q&As. I target to close the session around 3:30, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. However, you can ask a question, you can park the questions till the end of the session, or otherwise, I will stop in the middle of, or at end of any section just to ask. But I may not have the bandwidth to go for a longer time to respond to the questions. So kindly be brief and specific in your questions, so that I will be to save some time. So first of all, what exactly we understand as a digital age? When digital economies, any digital enterprise in an organization which basically use the digital means to interact with their customers and suppliers. It can be any business, any organization, any corporate, any non-profit, or maybe a freelance as well. A person can be a digital enterprise who's running its or offering services using the digital means. Or on the other way, when we can also define digital enterprise as an organization that uses the technology as a competitive advantage in its internal and external operations. Now, when it comes to the competitive advantage, we have the big names around the globe in which we are talking about, who has traditionally were into a very normal traditional businesses, but they have transformed themselves as an emerging tycoons on the globe through the internet, and they have penetrated around all over the globe and became the powers. Such as one of the big example which I'll share with you is the Google, Amazon, and so on. But however, digital enterprises are not actually were born as a result of some consequence. It has been made and well thought of with the result of a well thought of process. The whole transformation journey, if we see just back, if we take ourselves back in a couple of decades, where we were having the challenges of computing power, the shortage of memory and bulky machines we were dealing with. So now we are using with these tiny mobile smartphones, which are more powerful than the computers of back in 90s, have changed and transformed the way we interact, the way we do the business, to improve the overall productivity of the socialization, and our transaction processes have been improved as well. So overall, it helps optimizing the existing assets to grow for any digital enterprise, for any existing businesses as well. Now, as an example, I just need to stop here. Shazad bhai, I need a tip here just to move this bar, which is creating a hindrance for me. ये ऊपर जो bar आ रहा है, I need to move it somewhere because वो heading जो है वो मैं miss कर पा रहा हूँ.
नहीं तो उसको मेरा ख्याल है वहाँ पे वो होगा एडो की होगी, उसको दबाएं ज़्यादा. व्यू ऑप्शंस में देखें आपके पास क्या ऑप्शंस आ रही हैं, या उसको नीचे ले आए. नजर तुम्हें वैसे साफ आ रहा है सब लोगों को.
Yeah, but it's because I'm sharing my screen, so that bar, control bar was coming on the top, which I have moved just now. So because it's blocking my content on this slide. So anyway, yeah, I managed to move it.
लेकिन हमें तो नजर आ रहा था साफ. We can see digital enterprise.
वो आपको आएगा क्योंकि ये control bar जो है वो सिर्फ मुझे आ रहा है because that's related to the screen sharing only. Right. So coming back to this thing, so as an example, I will definitely take the topmost example or relevant to the digital enterprise, which is Amazon, which actually started with the concept of being a digital business. Eventually, if we see that the exponentially it has grown in the past few years, and why? Because it has actually started from the concept of the core foundation was the has been laid out in a way that has to be meant for internet to serve their customers from an electronic means. So then, as a result, they became the world's largest internet company today, an online marketplace. And they are the AI assistant provided at the moment, live streaming platform and cloud computing, though they're one of the biggest 5 companies of the US in IT industry, as along with Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Facebook. But most important thing here, what we need to understand is they are one of the most influential economic and cultural forces in the world now. How many people are actually got onto the internet business only because of the Amazon? I think if we all of us we know some names in Pakistan who are actually have encouraging quite putting the efforts down to encourage people to start their digital businesses or the startups. One name I can think of is the Enablers, and so on. So if we compare in US, the revenue of the US government which is being generated from the e-commerce industry is 56% of their revenue is coming only from Amazon now, as of today. So that's strong. The only thing was that when they have actually started with the concept of the true digital enterprise. Now, what exactly is the digital trust, as I asked in the start of the session? So some people said that it's a digital transformation trust or the trust either way or here and there. But as I said, in order to understand the digital trust, first, let's understand the trust in the real world, because that everyone we know, we deal with, we apply that approaches in our daily lives to develop our relationships, to strengthen our relationships, to work with the customers, suppliers, and stakeholders to develop the trustworthy relationships. So trust is primarily is a belief, an expectation that the specific outcome will occur. If I trust someone, I believe, at least I expect that he will support me one day if I'm into a trouble. Similarly, it is basically a mental model of making sense of the world around. This mental model is being built on some of our past experiences. क्योंकि हमारे जो लाइफ के जो मुशाहिदात या तजर्बात होते हैं उसकी बिना पर हम किसी पर जो है वो एतमाद कर पाते हैं या हम जो है वो जो भरोसा करते हैं या नहीं करते. So that is, in other words, we can say is basically a measure of the perceived reliability. कि हम कितना rely कर सकते हैं दूसरों पे, the perceived reliability that the specific outcome will happen again. So that's the way I define the trust in the real world, but that is depending on few parameters which we need to understand in the context of, I would say, in the context of our relational ideologies, or in other words, in the more leadership track, the courses and the mentoring stuff, these things are being taught, which are same way applicable everywhere in the real life as well. Just to start with, the trust is fundamentally depending on the 3 pillars. One is what? Respect. Second, integrity. And third is empathy. There is no relation which can establish, based on my point of view at least, is if there is no respect. If the highest level of respect you can give to someone, if you trust someone, but the respect has to be based on equality, courtesy, and patience. Then the respect becomes the bond between a relation. That's whether it's a personal relation or professional, or on corporate level of relation as well. the traits when it comes to the human the side of it, the people side of it, the same way it applies. Similarly, the integrity, which is basically, having a trustworthy relationship with someone, basically requires a strong character with integrity, with based on some rules and principles, which are basically what? That there has to be a transparency. There shouldn't be like, the hidden or gray areas within the relation. And there should be authenticity as well. That means there shouldn't be a fake information going on and, dishonesty and all that. So that's why the integrity has to be there, has play an important role. And third part is the empathy, where empathy is all about understanding the other party from their point of reference. If I'm saying something such as like when all of us, we have faced the situation that when, the WhatsApp is the biggest one, now became the biggest platform for creating confusions. Because the small messages, that the text messages is, we don't know that how will be interpreted on the other side. So it is really challenging to understand the other party from their point of reference. If our viewpoint to look into one issue or one problem or one situation will not be same, will not be understand each other appropriately or in a better way. So that in such way, we have to be very understanding to each other. And then we have to be non-judgmental. We should not be jumping on the conclusions. We should try to give it understand other person from his point of view. We should not apply our logic in our mind, and we have to communicate the things the same way. That's how I understand or I feel myself as a trust from my own, the derived definition, I would say, which I learned from different sources. Now, when it comes to establishing the relationship, we need to verify the trust measures, right? Which is basically what? The credential. Now, if, for example, a person A comes to me and he said, like, when his name is Mr. Donalds, and he's from New Zealand, and he has a master's degree, and he owns a property in US. So what exactly, how I will be trusting his statement, because I will be going and verifying his own credentials, such as what he said, his name is Mr. Donald, so I'll check his identification proof, which could be a passport. And he said he's a master's degree holder, I'll check his master's degree. And the property documentation, if he really owns a property. So it's the social proof of work or for to getting into any engagement. So that basically we need, that provides authenticity, that what he's stating is exactly right. So that's the start of the journey with trustworthy efforts. I hope I'm making some sense. So far, my pace is good, and all of us, we are getting what I'm saying. I just need a couple of comments on this.
Yes.
Right. Right. So going further, so within this digital age, which has basically changed our society, the way we interact, we need to verify these credentials in a more digital way these days. So digital trust basically is verifying the credentials to rely on someone in using the digital means, right? So that could be digital identity as an example, which is could be username, could be our ID card, the chip card, and so on. The paraphrase, the password for authentication, the biometric authentication can be used as the identification as well, and the digital certificate for the machines to establish the trustworthy relationships, and so on. These are the examples of digital credentials. Based on all of this, what we have just studied now, we can derive this definition that digital trust is the currency of digital economy. So why we are saying so? Because that applies in the same way as I have basically explained the trust concept, the concept of the trust in the real world, the same way it applies in the digital world as well, that if there's no trust, there's no transaction, there's no relation. So if that basically is, if there's a trust, then we can get into the around the table, talk about the business opportunities transparently with a strong, the high levels of integrity, and we can understand each other from each other's point of view, so that we can, have a healthy business transactions going forward. And that's why we are saying or referring as digital trust as a currency of digital economy. And that applies the same way in a real life as well. Now, when we talk about digital economy or the digital, when within the digital enterprise, we have to interact with each other and put down the efforts to develop the trust, what are the key pillars which we need to consider while understanding the ecosystem of digital trust? So primarily one pillar is the people part, who are basically the behind all that digital channels through which they are interacting with each other. So end of the day, they are the people. That could be the individuals, corporates, customers, suppliers, employees, who are using those digital means to interact with each other. And the second pillar is the data. Data is all about, as we know, that when this is the resource or the asset which everyone wants to protect, everyone wants to use, exchange, or whatever in a digital way. So when we are talking about the digital way, I mean, we are talking about the data as the premium asset which we want to protect as the pillar. However, within the digital trust ecosystem, this is an important pillar because we want the data leakage and prevention and the privacy matters are important to consider when it comes to the digital trust. That we'll discuss in detail in the next couple of slides. The third pillar is all that technological infrastructure which is being used by the people to access the data, exchange the data, or store the data. And that all technological infrastructure includes all the layers of the technology, which includes the servers, network, databases, the data layer, business applications, and so on. So these are the three pillars of the digital ecosystem which we need to understand how we're gonna consider these specific areas to apply the measures to implement the digital trust mechanisms. Now, based on my additional study, as I said, when I'm doing my doctoral research, is that there are two other pillars which are, involved, but in a more advanced stage, which is not mentioned here, but because that requires a bit of more additional areas to cover. Considering a time shortage, and I'll stick with these three, but I'll just mention slightly here that what are those two. The fourth one is basically the services part, where when it comes to trust, the quality has to, or service quality has to play a very important role. Because if we do not offer service with quality, quality means there's a consistency. If I have served you a pizza in this particular competitive price within this time period and with good tasty, a very good taste, I expect at least the same next time or better. That's exactly the quality that has to be consistent every time. If the quality or the taste is not the same next time, it will not. So that as well has to be considered when it comes to the to see the trust relationship with customers. The fifth one is more about ethics, our cultural context of it, because that's all also basically applicable, because privacy is been interpreted differently in different cultures. So that's the area, newly evolved area, which we called as digital ethics, needs to be considered and looked upon and studied upon in a detail to understand that aspect. So those are the additional details which I wanted to share. So coming back to this core 3 pillars, considering our the current discussion, digital trust is all about getting the confidence by our stakeholders on the people who are interacting with our digital enterprise, on the data which is being created, defined, used, stored, exchanged within our data enterprise, and the systems or the technological infrastructure which is being used within our digital enterprise. It is conclusively, we can say it's a level of confidence over our people, data, and systems. We do not have the level of confidence, we cannot trust, or the stakeholders won't trust. So as all of us, we know that there are internal stakeholders, then there are external stakeholders, which are customers, suppliers, contractors, and so on. Internal stakeholders are the different departments and the staff and so on. So everyone have to have a confidence over our systems and data to develop a healthy journey to achieve the maturity of digital trust within your digital enterprise. As an example, I'll share one incident with me that when I was in a bank, and that time when I was head of business continuity in Al Ahli Bank of Kuwait, some time back, a few years back, and that bank happens to have a breach. And we know that when there was some fraudulent transactions happened in result of that breach, and some of the customers' data was leaked, as well as some money as well. So in result of that, practically what happened was, including myself and some senior officials as well, along with the other staff of the bank, has taken out the money from their own accounts from the same bank where we were working, because we were not trusting our own systems, that how protected they are. That's why how the trust, when we say, is currency of digital economy. There's no trust, there's no business, there's no transaction. I hope I'm making some sense till now. I need just a few yeses that everything's okay so far. My pace, my content. Shehzad bhai?
जी बिल्कुल ठीक जा रहा है, it's fine.
Yeah.
लेकिन आपका
Okay, now
पेज तेज कर लें अपना.
जी I can understand. So now we'll jump on to the strategies and the approaches which we need to adopt in order to develop the digital trust within or among your stakeholders and within the context of a digital enterprise. So as we know that when there are 3 pillars, people, data, and systems. So how actually, the question is how we build the digital trust. So first of all, we need to have these questions around these pillars. The first of all, the people who are interacting with our digital enterprise, are they real? Are they verified? Have they validated that if Ahmad is interacting with your digital enterprise as a customer, is he really Ahmad? Or a fake, a person or fake ID. Similarly, the data, is it protected and the privacy has been maintained? The third thing is, when our systems, our infrastructure is robust or reliable? Is he have the contingent arrangements in case of any interruption happens or any disruption happens, when it can take over, has a failover mechanism, or there's a disaster recovery site which is fully, empowered with the right tools and set the people to take over the business operations in case of any disaster, and so on. So all of these questions we need to consider while developing our approach to build the digital trust mechanisms in your organization. So as we say, we need to, first of all, verify people. We need to have a mechanism to verify people who are interacting with our digital enterprise. So I'm keep saying digital enterprise in the context of that. I hope that every one of us understand the digital enterprise is your business, your overall organizational systems, and in a case, for example, Amazon as an example I have given. So the data which we are using or creating or defining or storing or whatever is protected, and our systems or infrastructure is secured. That's what we need to ensure. So how do we verify people? In order to verify people, generally the best practice is to have an identity and access management program defined, tailored, and customized as per the requirements of your organization, and implement the related technologies to automate the processes of identity governance and so on, and access management accordingly. Now, what exactly is that? If you see the very first thing is the identity management. Basically, this is the whole process where you identify the actually physical people and create the digital IDs for them, which are uniquely identified, so that we know that this user ID belongs to that particular person, or whatever form of digital ID is there. That could be the scanning card, that could be RFID, that could be the username, that could be the biometric, the thumbprint as well, any form of an ID. Now, the second level is how you're going to manage the access to a particular digital resource or data or application or a database or device or whatever. So in order to have the authentication mechanisms defined, that depends on what technologies you are using. That basically there's a deeper study to understand that how we can have a multi-level of authentication, which is considered a multi-factor authentication. I hope most of us we understand. That includes the biometric, one-time password. That includes the form of a smart tokens. That includes the form of biometric controls as well, which we use to have a multi-factor authentication to authenticate that this particular ID belongs to that person, is authorized to access that particular resource. And similarly, we have to have a user compliance and auditing mechanisms in place, which is used by this identity and access management solutions, which have a complete trail of what access profiles are being assigned to which IDs and which IDs are accessing what resources. All the trails are being defined, which are being used to ensure that there, in case of to have an appropriate detective control to monitor in case of any malicious activities going on within your digital enterprise. So this is a whole journey which requires a complete separate dedicated session into it. I'll not go deeper. I'll keep our discussion within this context. So we need to have an identity and access management program in order to define the digital identities and verify people based on their original credentials, and we need to authorize them to the respective resources which they have been authorized for, and a monitoring mechanism in order to have the auditing capability to minimize, to be able to detect the malicious activities in the organization. Now here it is a typical example, a diagram just to present, like if left side is starting, showing a different groups of the identities which are gathered. The top one is the application related identities, the business application. In any digital enterprise, we are generally using multiple business applications. That could be the Salesforce, the sales people are using others, operations people are using others, and the auditors, they are using others, and risk people, they are using others, and so on. So all of the identities for the applications are a separate group. And then we have basically a different type of personas of the people. When we talk about the people, what we need to identify what type of the person, the role or the persona he has in the context of digital enterprise. Is he a customer? Is he an employee, which is internal stakeholder, which is a consumer or contractor or a consultant or a chief or a head of department? Based on that, his persona, his user profile will be decided that what level of resources, and what level of resources he will be eligible to access to. And then the same concept comes to the digital device identities. When every device which needs to talk to the other has to get authenticated with each other. And there is, of course, the IDs which are defined as to represent as an identity within your digital enterprise. So that's holistically basically collects all the identities into one place, and that you can offer whether as a SaaS solution or from a cloud or a PaaS solution within your environment on premise in your overall in order to have that program in your organization. Now, the second pillar is that how we protect the data. I mean, there are different the strategies and approaches to protect the data depending on your organization size, depending on the nature of the business processes running behind, and more particularly, depending on the type of the data state. I would say that the states of the data. If the data is in motion, which is all data, which is we are talking about in your network, in your wires, on wireless LANs, and so on, there are different means to protect the data while being transmitted. There are different approaches to protect the data while data is in use, which means data inside the applications. Every application have its own security measures, structures, and the processes, and is supported by different type of technologies. Accordingly, we have to adopt the security controls around that. Similarly, when it comes to data at rest, that means the data in databases where it's been stored. So the security measures around the DBMS is different approaches as compared to the others. And similarly, when data is in cloud, which means everywhere, the measures are different. So depending on the state of the data, we come up with the data protection approaches, which we need to apply from a process point of view, as well as we have to empower with the right technology in place. One typical example, anyone would like to give me an example of data in motion protection method? Anyone?
Why won't it not like a friend?
Firewall rules.
Firewall rules is one. DLP is one another aspect of it, and which is leakage and prevention.
TLS is there for email.
TLS is there, yeah. So these are the different, the encryption is another control, which is basically used to protect the data from a leakage or non-repudiation attacks and all man-in-the-middle attacks. So having that said, that approaches has to be more specifically defined as per your organizational controls, environments, and processes, and the underlying technologies which are being used in order to protect the data. Now, whatever we have discussed is in this diagram. The technical controls are required to be implemented based on the state of the
How
data.
new?
I'm
What
sorry,
does it even mean? They can't find the fly.
which file? Sorry, someone is has to be mute. So now I'll come to the third pillar, though equally all these three pillars are important, but I mean, in the context of our discussion, I mean, I will give a bit of more importance and depending respect to the audience today. I'll give a bit of more weight to this pillar, which covers the whole infrastructure and each layer of the technology infrastructure. That includes the databases, servers, applications, and network, and what security measures you want to implement to protect our technology infrastructure. May I ask that we have 25 participants now. How many of us know about a zero trust model? Anyone who knows about zero trust?
Yes, I know about that.
Right. One.
Yes,
Right.
we know most of them. So
Right. So we have a fair good idea about what exactly the zero trust. So zero trust model is primarily based on, it's a concept. It's been slightly confused with or wrongly mixed with the digital enterprise. In fact, it's not. It's two separate things. Digital trust is primarily a framework, a governance framework to look into from a digital, entrepreneurial mindset. However, zero trust is an approach to apply when it comes to implement the security measures with respect to each and every technological layer. Such as in a network, most common area, which is everyone is talking about, like, having the EDR solutions, having the semantic email gateways and so on, up to the extent that every device has to have a few transactions, few handshakes in order to develop a trust relationship with each other. Because from the start, we have a green ground. There is no trust means a zero trust. So every device, every identity, every application, every operating system has to interact with each other, have few transactions in order to develop and grow the trust relationship with each other. And then there is a rating of level of trust to each other. That's why we call it as, the trusted domains and trusted sites and trusted IPs and all that. So it's all, there's a different approaches to adopt and apply the zero trust concepts in the environment. That depends on what type or of the project you are involved with. This is an essential, I would say, an element to consider now while designing our technological infrastructure, especially our security architects have to consider this thing when it comes to security by design. And similarly, when we are talking about confidentiality or disclosure measures, when we talk about the privacy aspects of the information, so we talk about privacy by design, because there we usually talk about, like, the PII security more talks about confidentiality. Does anyone know about PII?
yes,
Yes, we know that.
Yeah, so personally identifiable information means that it's a small data set of the larger, all the information which you talk about. So the whole study of ISMS is completely focused. If we focus only on PII, that basically is exactly the standard, which is ISO 27017. So 27,017 is PII and 27,018, which is on cloud. PII on the cloud. These two are the two standards which you need to consider while studying into the privacy aspects of the PII. But just in the context of this discussion, I'll mention few more standards in next few slides, which as an additional study, which all of us we need to consider to refer to. So while implementing the security systems, I think all of us, we understand, as I explained, the network security architecture based on the zero trust, how we basically put the design, this whole thing is from a security by design. And then we have an enterprise edge, server provider edge, and based on the different approaches what we have, underlying technologies, Palo Alto, Fortinet, all the network giants, they have their own models to implement to, but those are always be tailorable or customizable within the context of organization. And then there's an important aspect I just want to touch upon is the application security when it comes to the zero trust approaches, because application from the security by design within the application, which is secure coding, and we are talking about the concept of DevSecOps. That's where basically we can embed the security measures on actually the most granular form of security within your enterprise, because that's where the data has to be originated and stored and processed most of the time. So our SAST and DAST applications has to be considered really seriously when we are talking about the security by design while implementing zero trust model approaches. Then we have a zero trust maturity curve. Like of course, it's a journey, and as I said, initially we have all our identities scattered, fragmented all over the organization, and then we define our identity and access management program of the overall organization as per the context of our organization needs, and we customize the processes and the technology, and accordingly we take it from to the level of the stage 2, which is contextual access. That's basically where it introduces rule-based processing and machine learning and so on, and at the end adaptive workforce, which is risk-based access policies, continuous and adaptive authentication. So we have to have a new concept, emerging concept of the system, which is called as verification as a service. So it's or in other words, in a more advanced and more layman, and in the context of this session, we can say trust as a service, means that every transaction, every customer which comes has to be verified. So that will be offered as a service. So that's a journey which basically evolved along with the evolution of achieving the maturity within the processes, technology infrastructure, as well as the people mindset as well. Now, digital trust governance, because every concept of such an enterprise initiative has to be backed up or supported by a strong processes, strong framework, well-defined roles and responsibilities, and more particularly ownership and accountability. If we don't define that, we are signing for a failure. That's why, being a governance expert myself, when I give everything is important here. The most important, I would say, is the properly defined governance model, such as ownership and accountability. That's basically decides the success rate and the failure for the enterprise initiatives. Now, from the context of governance, first try to see this, understand that it looked like a pyramid, but it has a deep meaning behind that, because you may not be able to correlate the text written to next to each layer in the pyramid. What exactly pyramid is showing is the level of ownerships depending on the roles and the scale of the responsibility. Because IT and information security and business managers has to take a functional responsibility to drive cybersecurity initiatives in your organization. However, who actually will be held accountable if anything goes wrong? So that's upper layer, which is either CTO or Chief Operating Officer or the CISO. If anything goes wrong, in the context of digital trust, I'm saying cybersecurity is more talk about the real-time incident response efforts where you are doing the incident triage, forensics and network protections, and the security, architecting the solutions from a security point of view, monitoring and so on. But cyber resilience is the important part when it comes to when we design the SOC. We design from a point of view that what level of incident response maturity is required for your organization. Accordingly, we drive the whole things and how automate your processes or the playbooks would be, and do we need a SOAR platform and so on. But look at from a little bigger angle that if your SOC room get on fire, that's a physical incident that basically jeopardizes the whole thing. So the cyber resilience, which talks about the breaches or the disruptive incidents within your from a digital context, it equally goes hand in hand with your organizational resilience efforts as well, which is basically your SOC, the continuity plan, I would say, or the operational continuity plan of your security has to go hand in hand with the organizational BCP. So that's why the ownership of this cyber resilience I'm giving with CTO and COO level. But digital trust is even more wider and more bigger in the context when it comes to looking to the true concept, which is dealing with external stakeholders as well, which is customers and investors and all that, is that this has to be owned by the CEO and CRO level. Why? Because this is basically is the sum of the efforts in your cybersecurity, in your resilience efforts, as well as your organizational business strategies as well. Why? Because the CISO is not the only one who has to decide on the digital trust efforts. CISO and the CIO and the Chief Business Officer, or in the context of this COO, has to sit down together to develop a strong business strategy addressing the digital trust aspect, to work together hand in hand to deliver the quality service to your customers and stakeholders, considering the trustworthy long-term relationships. That's why, in my opinion, the owner of digital trust efforts has to be the CRO. And it is basically the measure of the confidence of your stakeholders over your digital enterprise pillars, which are people in the digital enterprise context, which are digital identities and all that, and data, how protected your data is, and how robust and resilient your technology infrastructure it is. So in my opinion, it has to be implemented as a key risk indicator as part of your enterprise risk register to monitor based on the the predefined threshold, that how confident we are, that how strong relations we have with our customers of our digital enterprise. As an example, so as I said, CRO has to have a joint responsibility to drive this whole digital trust efforts with the Chief Business Officer or CIO and CISO together. But if you see that, I mean, the passage of time, these new evolutions of these niche areas which are being evolved as part of cybersecurity and the risk frameworks, SAP organization, one of the biggest ERP organization, have hired a person with the title Chief Trust Officer now. So this is becoming a completely an area where it will be a separate, I would say, a segment, operation or functional segment of your risk management efforts in your organization to combine, the efforts of business, technology, and operations point of view to achieve our trustworthy relationships with your customers. As a reference study for the newly evolved, the areas and the studies which are coming from a new roles and emerging roles in the cybersecurity space and related are, one is the NIST. It's a framework name is NIST, which is National Initiative of Cybersecurity Education. You can search on the website, internet, that will give you the newly evolved areas within cybersecurity and how it's growing. From a GRC point of view, they're more taking it towards the, from a in the context of privacy, trust, and so on. And apart from this thing, when, as I said, as additional studies, you need to look into ISO, which most of us, we already know ISO 27001 and 2 and 5. And of course, from a PII privacy point of view, ISO has started a new range of the privacy related standards, which is starting from 29,000. So 29,001 is a privacy management standard. So that all of us, most of the people would like to refer to. And then the final message we want to give is that digital trust is not a process or a technology. It's just a mindset of a technopreneurs or techno entrepreneurs entrepreneurial mindset, which needs to follow based on keeping this thing in mind that you need to do your business and serve your customers from a digital means. And cybersecurity is a lifestyle now, which you learn it, nurture it, live it, share it. Thank you very much.